Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as is the normal welcome. And hello, wherever you are in the world today, joining us for the Next in the Summer live stream series from Captivate. I'm your host, regular host, Danny Brown, going through all the cool features that Captivate has to offer to A, save you time in production, and B, help you grow your podcast. And with this live stream summer series, we're just going through the dashboard in each different section and going through how you can really get the best from each section of the dashboard. So we'll do the usual 4 or 5 minutes, just let people, jump into the stream. And just as usual, just say where you are, drop yourself in the comments, don't drop yourself in the comments. Just drop your name in the comments, where you're from, what you're up to, what you're doing in summer, what your podcast is, etc. And we'll just get to know who's here. Like I say, we'll go through some intros for the next 4 or 5 minutes, let people join in, do a quick bit of housekeeping, and then we'll go into the stream itself, which this week is all about the dynamic show notes feature, which is an awesome feature for saving time on your production side. So we got good old David coming from Amarillo, Texas, USA. One thing I meant to ask David, and I'll ask some others as well as they start to appear. Obviously, the US has got some great football teams. I call it American football because I'm not in the US, but you've got some great football teams. But I'm not sure, does Amarillo have one? Or is there like another? I mean, obviously Dallas, I feel, is probably one of the bigger teams, but does Amarillo have like a college team or anything like that? We got Ben. Ben's in the comments on the old Captivate account doing the usual stuff. So Ben will pick up any questions that you have about the stream. Excuse me, my allergies are playing up a little bit today, so I'm a little bit bunged up with allergies, so I apologize for that. But yeah, Ben will pick up any questions. So speaking of that, let's just bring up this, and we'll just drop this at the bottom for now. And we got Sloan released episode 2, Sleep with Prince, on Sleep with Rockstars, the Gen X Sleep podcast. Hot and humid, yeah. We're okay. We had a few humid days recently, Sloan, but we're settled down. Bit nicer with weather now. It's a bit more manageable. But Sleep with Prince, awesome. Like Gen X, that's my generation, so I'm all over this podcast anyway. And I know we chatted in support earlier this week. You've got some great episodes coming up, so looking forward to that. But if you're a Gen Xer and you love podcasts, that help you sleep, and give a bit of history with music stars of the Gen X period, this is a great podcast for you. Minor League Baseball, got you. Division II University, West Texas A&M University. That's very cool. The reason I was asking David is I was on a podcast a few months back now, and it's Sean Dillon, Beyond the Mic with Sean Dillon, and he has another podcast that he does. It's all about college football. So there's him, and I think there's 3 co-hosts, and they essentially do like a live podcast. So it's a live podcast recording, and it's all about the odds for college football, etc., and what teams are expected to win, go for trophies, all that cool stuff. So really good podcast, real interesting, and I was just curious. But yeah, that's very cool. Division II University, West Texas A&M, very cool. And you're very welcome, Sloan. And good to see you, Dealcasters. Hi, Chris, how you doing? Atlanta, never been, got close to it, I think. When I say got close to it, I've done the stopover at the Atlanta airport. I was blown away how cool that airport is. That's probably one of the best airports I've ever been to. I don't really like traveling a lot anyway. So when I find an airport like that, it had like free Wi-Fi all through the airport, really fast Wi-Fi, loads of power outlets, great, easy to get around, etc. So kudos on that. Obviously, it's not your airport, but kudos on the Atlanta airport. Like I say, it makes a difference when you're not a great traveler. What's your podcast about, Dealcasters? Let us know, just like I say, drop in the comments there. Let us know what it's about. We can always check it out if anybody's interested in that podcast, for sure. Yeah, I agree, Sloan. And I don't think it was Atlanta, but I agree. The art installations there were amazing. I'm trying to think of the one, and it might be Atlanta. It's been a while since I've been there. There was one where if you're going down the Travelator steps or whatever it is, there's a whole bunch of classic airplanes hanging from the ceiling. That might be, is that Chicago here? I'm not sure. I've not been to a lot of US airports, so it's been a while. But yeah, that was also cool, seeing these like various airplanes from across history. So from the 20s, 30s, 40s, like first aviation airplanes, etc., right up to modern. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, love, like when you find a good airport, I'm always up for that. So we'll give everybody another couple of minutes and then we'll jump into today's live stream. And usual stuff, we'll go through the live stream and Q&A at the end about any questions about what we've covered today in the live stream. So as I mentioned, Ben, my colleague who's the head of content over at Captivate, he's in the comment section under the Captivate user. So he'll be picking up any questions that you drop in there for the live stream, and I'll go through the comments afterwards, once the stream's done, and just see if there's any questions to pick up there. So 11:06, we'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll kick in. Speaking of art installations, what's your favorite, Sloan? What's the one that, or maybe two, that stands out for you and that are really, really good art installations? Because one of the airports that I like flying out of, and again, I apologize for my voice today, it's a little bit bunged up. There's lots of pollen and grass and everything outside, so I've got the window and all that closed, obviously. But one of my favorite airports is in Toronto. It's called the Bailey Bishop Airport. It's on the island in Toronto. And that's just amazing. That's got a lot of cool art as you go up the travelator. It's got a lot of cool aviation history stuff as well. I just think it makes like such a nice change, from your usual grey concrete blocks and then your corridors and your lifts and escalators, etc. So I'm always happy to find, if I do have to travel, always happy to find an airport that's got pretty cool stuff. So let's dig in now. So as I mentioned, my name's Danny Brown. I'm the head of podcaster support and experience here at Captivate FM, and we're a hosting, distribution, measurement, and monetization platform for the serious indie podcaster, right up to the biggest podcasts around. And we have two mantras when we create features for podcasters. One is to save you time on production and creating your podcast, and two is to grow your podcast and grow your show, whatever these may look like. So it may be growing subscribers, downloads, listeners. It may be memberships, tips. It just may be, growing your brand awareness with the industry that your podcast is in. You may want to look for business for your consulting, speaking gigs, whatever growth looks like. So that's what we do at Captivate. And if it doesn't meet one of these mantras, we basically won't release the feature. We'll just put that in the back burner for next time maybe. So today we're going to look at a feature that saves you on production time and creating your podcast. And you can use it if you have a podcast team. Your podcast team can use it as well, like producers, creators of the episode, etc., editors. So it's a really cool feature, and it's called Dynamic Show Notes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my screen for the test podcast that we created, and we'll go through the Dynamic Show Notes now. And as I mentioned, I'll leave the little ticker at the bottom. So if you do have any questions, drop them in the comments with question at the start, and we'll pick that up for the live Q&A. So the live stream will be about 30, 34, 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have the questions at the end. Okay, so let's just bring up my screen and go here, and just want to make sure that we've got the nice full screen. There we go. Okay, so this is the Captivate dashboard, and this is like I said, this is just a test show that we put together for the live stream series throughout the summer. So you can see some basic analytics here, etc. And down the left-hand side of the dashboard is where you'll see all the normal features. So content management, my podcast, insights, research and planning, Amy, which is our dynamic ads content, monetization, all the cool stuff that you can use with Captivate. But today we want to feature on dynamic show notes. And the reason we create dynamic show notes is really, a lot of the times when you create a podcast and you're putting your show notes together, you may create it on an external document. So maybe Google Docs, Notion, Word Docs, something like that. And then when it comes time to create your episode, you'll just copy paste that over when you're creating an episode. That's cool, nothing wrong with that. But there's a more effective way of doing that, especially if you've got content or copy that you use in every single episode. So for example, calls to action, following you on socials or sign up for a newsletter, following the podcast, etc. Maybe you have affiliate programs, maybe you have a Patreon, anything like that. So if that's stuff that you put in every single episode, it doesn't make sense to have to copy paste that all the time into your episode show notes each time you create a new episode. So this is where dynamic show notes come into play. And dynamic show notes allows you to create a template, a default template, and also use blocks and custom shortcodes. Now, what that looks like, so this is the Chit Chat with Claire and Steve podcast. Let me just quickly show you one of the other podcasts that I have this set up on. So if I go to my 5 Random Questions podcast and go to show notes, you'll see here I've got a default template. Then on blocks, I have footer, guest info, tools and resources. And then I've got custom shortcodes that I don't really use, but I could use if I want. So basically, the template is essentially, you can see here, I've got a little bit of text at the top of the show notes section. And then I've got 3 shortcodes that are my blocks. So that's research links, tools and resources, and footer. Okay. So what that looks like is when I'm on the actual show notes section, you can see in my blocks, I've got my footer has all my calls to action here and links to them. And then my tools and resources has maybe the features and products that I use there. Okay. And don't worry, I'll show you exactly how to create this on the test show. So when that's on the episode and I create a new episode, you can see all that gets loaded immediately for me. So it's already there for me. And if I go to my website, okay, so I'm going to bring up the website for this episode, for this podcast, but I show you quickly on this this show that I've got at the moment. So you can see here, this is the blurb that I put in manually, and then I've got my tools and resources and footer calls to action or blocks in here. So if I go to the public website for this episode, which was like turn-in 1, so let's go to the website and share this tab. So if I go to the turns 1 here, you can see here, this is the only part that I actually added manually to my episode show notes. All the stuff down below that is being added for me by default as soon as I hit create new episode. So you can see here, you can get a pretty good and optimized show notes section, especially when you've got a proper episode out. So that was like a bonus one. If I go to a proper episode where it's got a guest, etc., you can see here, I've now got the guest info, the bio, and her links, etc., research links, a whole bunch of stuff here, all done by the dynamic show notes. This was the only part that I added to the episode. Okay, so let's just go back to the test show. So let's go to Chit Chat and let's set this up. So what you would do is you go down to the show notes section under content management. And here you'll see you've got templates, blocks, and custom shortcodes. There's a couple of ways you can create a template, and this is great for creating a default template that loads every single time you add a new episode. So one way you can do it is add your first show notes template here. So I'm just going to click that. And then once I've got that open, I'm just going to get some copy that I did earlier and just paste that over here. So I'm going to give this a template label. So this is going to be my default, for example. Okay. And I'm going to copy paste this stuff in here and just tidy it up a little, because when copying from Google, etc., you can obviously get a little bit of formatting carried across from there. So you can see here, this is the default, and I'm just going to put here, and so there. Anything under this line is now going to be the default template that gets loaded every time I publish a new episode. Anything above this line is what I would add manually to each episode. So it might be about the topic for this particular episode, because obviously each topic is different, or sorry, each week has a different topic, a different guest, that kind of stuff. So whatever you normally add manually, you can add here, but then setting up the default template allows you to set this up, and this will preload every single time you create a new episode. And all you would do is you would set this as a default down here. Okay, if you see the little checkbox there, it's blank. That isn't a default, but once I check it, that will now be loaded as a default template for every new episode that's created after I set this template up. So this is one way you can do it. You can copy and paste all the stuff that you would have there. So about the podcast, how to follow it, how to follow on socials, etc. Okay, so that's cool. So you can do that. I wouldn't recommend that, and there's a reason for that. And this is another reason why we built dynamic show notes. So it's great that when I create a new episode, let's just add a file here so you can start to see it taking shape. You can see here, there's my template loaded. That's awesome. And now up here is where I would just type in my manual copy that I want to talk about this specific episode. Okay. And that's great. That's great. That's like added that there. And I'm just going to put a dummy title. So that's added the show notes, and you've got your show notes ready to go. So I'm just going to go publish this episode. Okay. So that episode is published now. And once that's published, I've got my dynamic pre-roll processing at the moment, which is why you see this little processing feature here. That will now display all the show notes that I've loaded as my default template. So you can see here it's published. Let's go look at the episode, see if the website's up yet. There we go. So share this tab. So you can see here on the episode page for the website, this is the manual blurb that I added at the top of the default template once it, once the new episode page loaded for me. And here's all the stuff that I already added as my default template. So that's great. That saves you a lot of time having to copy paste a whole bunch of text like this. And especially when you have guests and you have calls to action and Patreons and all the other cool stuff that you might want to include on show notes, it just saves you a whole bunch of time copy pasting that. The reason I wouldn't go with this default template with all this text is if anything changes. So let's say, for example, your website address changes here, or you stop using Blue Sky, or you stop using Instagram, or Threads goes away and Meta just focuses on Meta and Instagram. Anything at all that changes in these show notes here. If you need to update that, you would have to go back, even though these are dynamic show notes, because you've got text and text links here, etc., you would have to go back into each episode's show notes and update the template. Because the template itself isn't dynamic. It's all the blocks, etc. you add to that makes the template dynamic afterwards. Okay, so what that means is, if you remember on the other podcast that I showed you, I had a bunch of blocks that were inserted as part of my default template. And that means that if any of this changes, I would just update the block on Captivate, and we will then automatically update all these episodes you've got published so far that has the template installed to have the right links, to remove the ones that have been deleted, etc. Okay, so what that looks like, let's come back to this tab and go back to show notes. I'm going to create some blocks now first, and then I'm going to create a new template. So on the block, you can see here the reusable sections of text that can be used within your templates, or even just in your show notes, as in when you need them if you don't want to use templates. And it just makes it real easy to make them dynamic, that are super simple to update. So at the moment, I don't have any blocks. So what I'm going to create now is, once again, I'm going to just copy some text over from the old Google, and I'm going to call this block my social calls to action, or just social accounts. Okay. And there you go. So this is my social media accounts. So the block label is social accounts, and here is follow us on our socials. So Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. That's great. So create block, and that has been created now for you. But I'm also going to add another block called calls to action. And no, I'm not. I'm going to make my affiliate block. Okay. So I'm going to make this one here. So let me just copy some text over again. And obviously, whatever you're using, whatever blocks you want to create yourself, you do that. So you can see here, affiliates, I've got my little disclaimer that mentions these may contain affiliate links, get a small percentage, blah, blah, blah. And it shows me my equipment and the recommended resources. Okay, so these would appear in the show notes once used. So now I've got two blocks, affiliates and social accounts, but maybe I also want to use a footer block that I can update with calls to action, information about the show, information about the hosts, anything like that. So let's create a footer block. Okay. And all I'm going to do there is I'm going to add this detail here. Okay. So again, just tidy this up because it's been transferred from Google Docs. So the footer is basically telling you about the show, the hosts. If you enjoy it, leave a rating, review, how you can follow it on podcast apps or on the website. So now I'm going to create that block. Okay. So now I've got 3 blocks. That's perfect. Now I want to go back to templates, and I'm going to create a new show template. Okay. So let's say this is going to be the summer template. Okay. I'm going to actually make this one the default for now. Okay. So summer template. And once again, I'm just going to have my little section here. So anything above my line is going to be the space that's left in the show notes for me to add content manually and copy manually. And then anything underneath it is what I'm going to add for my default template that's preloaded anytime you create a new episode. So right now I want to add my blocks that I've created. So I want to do the footer because that's the main one. And when I click add the footer, you'll notice here you can make it a dynamic block or a static block. I always recommend using it as a dynamic one because that allows you to update super easily later on. So again, if you need to remove an out-of-date social media platform or update a website address, or maybe if a co-hosted podcast loses one of the hosts and it reverts to like a solo podcast, or a new host comes on, or maybe a co-host brings on a new guest co-host, etc. It just makes it super simple to go into the block and update that information there that is then updated automatically across your template, across all the episodes that this has been added to. Okay, you can leave it static. So if there's something that you know will never ever change, so I don't know, what would never change? Maybe your name, for example. If you want to add something like that, by all means, use static, but generally we always recommend use dynamic. So let's insert block, and that's added my footer block. But I also want to add my social. I'm not going to do my affiliate stuff at the moment. I may do that on another template, but I'm just going to add my socials. Okay, so let's add that. So there we go. And I'm going to set this as default. So now we've got summer template, I've got my footer and social accounts. If I wanted to edit my default template that I previously created and add all these blocks, etc., I can do that. But again, it will only update moving forward. So this is why it's really a good idea if you're going to use dynamic show notes, either start from the beginning or use them on episodes from when you start adding dynamic or using dynamic show notes. You can go back manually and add your blocks that you created and use a template that way, but it can sort of mess with the formatting that you've already created for previous episodes. So that just a heads up on that front. Okay, so now I'm going to set this one as a default. Okay, so summer template, footer, social accounts. So let's create the new show notes template, and you can see here that the default one is no longer default. That's switched to summer template. Okay, so now if I go to create new episode, and let's just upload the file there, you can see here I've again got the blurb in here. I've again got the episode show notes section, and above here, this is where I would just type in my manual copy, or copy and paste that over from your production notes, etc. But I've now got my footer and social accounts blocks as part of this default template. So awesome, ready to publish. And I'm actually going to take this out, the pre-roll and post-roll. Okay, let's just say I don't want that in there, for example. So now I'm just going to publish the episode and let that be published. And that has now got the new template with the new blocks and the new calls to action, all that cool stuff that you've set up as the new template. Okay, so now if we have a look at the website for this one, and you can see it here. And as I mentioned, I never tidied it up quite properly for the blocks. But you can see here, here's the text that you would add manually to the show notes, above your default template that you're using. And you can see here, I've got my calls to action, about, etc. Block, and that's all the text being added here, and then socials here, for example. So again, it's a great way to start really creating full optimized show notes based on what you want to create. And you can create as many templates and use as many blocks and custom shortcodes as you wish. And it's really up to you which ones you use. So I have a default one for my main show, but as you saw, it's really simple. If I come back over here, it's really simple to create as many templates as you want. So maybe you have seasonal templates that have different messages. Maybe you have time-sensitive templates, for example, where you've got a promotion running and you want to, reflect that in your show notes and your blocks, etc. So this is where you can really start to get granular with what you create with the dynamic show notes, using templates, blocks, etc. So if, for example, I mentioned before that this is one of the reasons I wouldn't recommend using a text-based version of a default block, only because you've now got to, update anything that changes down the line. So if I go back to my templates, and let's say I no longer use threads, for example. Okay, so you can see here, if I go back to the website, you can see here I've got threads on my calls to action for socials. So follow us on socials, got threads here. So on the blocks, I want to remove that. So if I come over to blocks and go to social accounts, I just want to remove threads. So So all I do is I come in here and I just delete that. I may have a new social account. So maybe I'm on Mastodon, for example. Maybe I'm on, there's a Canadian one coming out soon, or meant to be anyway. Maybe I want to add that because I want to, add that there. Maybe I want to have my YouTube channel here. Whatever you want to do on the social accounts, if you just want to update it because you no longer use one and you've changed to a different one, etc. This is why it's great to create a social accounts block, because you can just come back in, make the change to that relevant social media account, and then just update the block. Okay, so what that will do is if you go to create new episode now, you can see it will still use the footer and social accounts. Okay, so let's just do that. And let's just do the normal blah, blah, blah. So it'll still use the footer and the social accounts information. Okay, but now what it should do, just publish the episode for you and let that process. I didn't remove the pre-roll and post-roll this time. But once that's processed, we'll just look at the website. But what that will do on this episode is it should now only show 3 social media accounts. So the 3 that are remaining after I removed, what one did I remove? Threads, I think. So let's go and have a look. Once the site loads, that one hasn't loaded just because I've probably published it too quickly for the site. But not a problem. We will get the episode page instead. Okay, so I'm just going to open up the web player. That might be a bit smaller to see, unfortunately, because it's the web player. But once the site page loads, I'll show you that as well. So now if I go to the show notes on this episode, you can see here I've still got my, about the show, call to action, etc. Go to socials here. It's a little bit hard here to see because of the color scheme, but I've only got 3 now. I've got Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram. So Threads has been removed from my blocks and from my show notes, and that's been done automatically. Okay. If I go, let's go to this tab. If I come back in and look at an episode that's already been published, and it may be that the cache isn't updated yet, but if I go to the episode page for this one, yeah, so it's still showing Threads here, purely because it's not updated the cache. Like Captivate sites use the API of Captivate as opposed to the RSS feed. So the API refreshes at a slightly different rate than the Captivate RSS feed, which is why the site takes a little bit longer than the actual RSS feed to update. But once the refresh is done, you'll see, as you saw on the player version, hopefully you saw it. I know it was very small and a weird color. I'll have to update that for the next live stream. You'll see that Threads wasn't there. It was just Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram. So that's how easy it is. Sorry, I took you out of that screen. Let's just go over here. I'll quickly show that. There you go. So you can see here, as I mentioned, I was on about Captivate's API powers the website as opposed to the RSS feed that powers, obviously, the RSS feed changes. But you can see on the player example that showed you that the Threads option was removed. So that would also be removed from the Captivate site once the API catches up to the RSS feed. And obviously, any changes you make on your RSS feed, that will be reflected on Apple, Spotify, any of the podcast apps that you use, like Pocket Cast, etc. Once they pull in their own feed update, that will also update your show notes to have just Blue Sky, TikTok, and Instagram. So that's why I always recommend to use the dynamic option of the blocks when you're adding it to a template. Now, going back to the show notes, as I mentioned, there's custom shortcode. And the shortcodes, I don't really use this feature as much. I know Mark, my colleague at Captivate, and Gary, they do use that on their Spark of Rebellion Star Wars show. And it's a really cool feature that you can sort of use as you go. You can also include them as part of your default templates when you're creating these. It just lets you have guest information, show links, titles, etc. So here, for example, you can create your first shortcode and give it a label. So let's just say website link. Okay. Now, not www site link, website link. And then you just add some text here. So it could be something like get more information about the show as well as merch, etc. on our website. Okay. So that would be that text there, for example. Now, with shortcodes, they are just plain text shortcodes. So it wouldn't support hyperlinks in the shortcode. But what you can do is if you use Ahref, which is where you've got a little tiny bit of HTML brackets, where you it goes back to old school HTML coding. You can add a little bit of code there that has the website inside the code. That will make it clickable. Okay, So that's what you would create with your custom shortcodes there. So just create custom shortcode. And again, if you wished, you could add that to your template. You could make it part of your blocks if you wanted to. Or you could add it as you go when you're creating new episodes. So if we go to create new episode, so what I'm going to do here, actually, let's go back to show notes. I'm going to edit this so I don't have any default templates at the moment. Okay, so update show notes template. So at the moment, I don't have any default. So this allows me to just create an episode as I would normally create an episode if I didn't use dynamic show notes. So let's go to create new. And as I mentioned, let's just put a quick dummy title in here. You can use shortcodes and blocks on the fly. So you could copy paste all your episode details over. So let's just say this was my episode show notes. I'm just going to paste that in for you. Okay, and just again tidy that up because Google Docs is never great for formatting when you bring it over. Okay, so there we go. So let's see, this is my default, not my default. This is my show notes that I would normally add manually when creating new episodes when I don't use the dynamic show notes template. But if I've got information here, for example, and I've created blocks or shortcodes, I can add them as I go. So you can see here, I've got affiliates, footer, and social accounts. So I'm going to add my social accounts and keep that dynamic as I mentioned. And then we've got shortcodes. Now, shortcodes, we have some default shortcodes that you can use, and you can also create the custom shortcode that I just showed you. So the default shortcodes are attribution links. So if you use Captivate's attribution link, you can add that to your show notes for share the show or summer promo, etc. So if you're working with a sponsor and it's not part, if you don't have a sponsor block that you've created, for example, another great way to use blocks is create a sponsor block. That way it's super easy to change up your sponsors as you you stop working with one and add a second one or add a new sponsor. So that's a great thing with the blocks. You can use it for whatever. So if you had a sponsored block, for example, you could that would appear here and you would show here. Okay, you've got attribution link, episode offer. So if you did want to have the episode offer, so yourself, you can drop that here if you wished. Is it explicit? Episode idea details. So if you use the episode planning and research tool that we looked at in a previous live stream, you can use that here. Episode idea title, episode link, episode number, episode season. This is great for just, again, optimizing your show notes to have as much information about your episode that makes it more findable on podcast apps and search, etc. Episode type, podcast offer, podcast copyright. So you can see here, there's a lot of shortcodes that you can add to the episode show notes. And you can do this on a per episode basis. So it may be that on some episodes you don't want episode title or links or copyright, etc. Research links. So if you use the Captivate browser extension, that allows you to be on a web page that you might want to discuss in a future upcoming episode. You can use the Captivate browser extension. We'll pull in the title of that page. We'll pull in the link, obviously, and a little blurb if there's a blurb there about that page, or you can update your own blurb there as well. So you can add research links. So I'm going to add them now. And again, anything that you add here, I generally recommend making it dynamic, purely because if you do need to change it down the line, instead of having to go back into all the episodes that you've got this, shortcode attached to, you just need to go into the shortcode itself and update the research link itself for that episode. Okay, so I'm going to have that here. And then you've also got, after research link, you've got website link. And then you've got some other options here. So if you want, they're more like if-then options. So if you really want to get super granular on creating a default template, you could add, if an episode is full, then this. If the episode is a bonus episode, then this. If the episode is a trailer, then this. If an episode has guests, then this. So if you add that, for example, okay, you can see here, if episode is bonus, then you might want to add some text here. So if it's a bonus episode, you might just want to add something like, this is a bonus episode of podcast name. See you on the next one. Or this is a bonus snippet from an interview with guest X. For the full episode, listen here. So it could just be like something that didn't make the final cut and you're making it as a bonus snippet to kind of encourage them to listen to the full episode elsewhere. It's like a nice little way to, use it as a lead magnet if you want to check out other episodes, go to your call to action. So there's a few of these options that you can do there. And so if you have this in there and you select the episode type or as bonus, which is down on the advanced options. So you can see here, episode type is normal, trailer, and bonus. If the episode type is normal and trailer, and you have this little blurb in here, that won't show on your podcast show notes or your episode show notes. So you won't have to worry about weird blocks and text showing up on your show notes because it's not in use. This will only appear if the episode is tagged as bonus. Okay, so if you're on the section here for episode meta and you select bonus and you've got this blurb in here, this little short code here, then whatever text you've added in this section, that will appear on your episode show notes just for this particular episode. So it's a really cool way, again, to get super granular and, almost set and forget a default template with as much or as little information as you want on the dynamic show notes section. Because obviously, if it is a bonus episode, we'll display whatever text you've got on the show notes. If it's not a bonus episode, we won't display it. Same if you've got guests. You may want to have an option where if you've got a guest on an episode and you use the guest show note, so let's just bring that one up, the guest shortcode. Okay, so let's bring that one up here. So if the episode has guests, for example, okay, then you might want to say, check out their upcoming, live stream, check out their upcoming book, whatever it is that's not part of their normal bio that you have as part of the episode. Again, you can use that here. So this way, you don't have to remember to add guest info because you're already got this as part of your episode. Okay. So again, this would be as part of your episode creation. So you would just choose on the guest section. Do you have a guest? Well, I don't have any guests for this because it's a test show at the moment. But if there was a guest that you had and a booking that you had as part of my podcast, I could choose that here and choose the booking it's relevant to. And then because of that, I can then start to add guest shortcodes along with this little one here where I can really customize it even more. So I've got my guest name, guest bio, guest URL, etc. But then I've got a special call to action that might just have, be sure to check out the guest on X, or be sure to check out the guest, or the guest has a special promo offer for you if you go here. Now, one thing to keep in mind, this is for this particular episode. This is why we recommend these ones you would add as you're creating the episode, because obviously you don't want guest A to be appearing on episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if they only appear on episode 1. So these particular ones, like where you've got the guest information, for example, or the bonus content from a guest, or whatever that looks like, this is the stuff that I would put in manually when you're creating an episode. Okay, so I've got all my, let's just go back to one of the episodes that I created earlier with a default template. Was it this one? No, so the second one. So if this was the episode that you're creating now, let's say we're creating this episode now. Okay, so I've got my default manual stuff that I've got at the top. I've got my footer and social accounts as part of my default template that I set up for the summer template, if you recall. Okay, and that's cool. So that's all the footer and social accounts. But if this was an episode that had a guest in it, and I wanted to use that option that the guest has a special offer for listeners to this episode, I would just go up to the shortcode section, go to if the episode had guests option here, and then this is where I would type in, thanks to Mandy for being a guest on this week's episode. She's got an awesome online course about singing, and she'd love to give a 20% discount to all listeners of this episode using code CHITCHAT. That's it. So you could put that in there, and then obviously you'd have the link to the website as part of the blocks, etc. So that's a really cool way to get super, super granular in creating show notes that are fully dynamic, that can be preloaded every time you create a new episode, that can have as much or as little information as you wish on there. And again, like I say, we have a bunch of custom shortcodes that we've created for you. If you create a sponsor shortcode, that will appear here. If you have a guest on the episode, the guest details will appear here. If you use Captivate's guest booking, we'll pull all that information in and you can add that to your show notes. The great thing with that, because it's all dynamic, is if any part of the guest information changes, so their job title, maybe they've got a new book out and you want to update that, for example, you would just go back to the guest details for that person and update the relevant section. So again, they might stop using a particular social media app. They may change their website address. Maybe their surname changed because they got married, whatever that looks like. And you need to update that. And if the guest is a recurring guest because they're a subject matter expert, so they're on your podcast every 10 episodes or something like that, what you don't want to do is have to go back and obviously change all the guest information on the previous episodes that that guest was on. So basically, it's a great way to use dynamic show notes to not only save you time from producing, but then once you've actually created, come back in and making sure that your episode show notes are as up to date as possible with the right guest info, the right host info, the right calls to action, the right sponsor messages. It's it's just like super easy to make this into fully optimized show notes that you can have as much or as little as you wish. Okay, and I think that's it for the show notes. So as I mentioned, if you come here, you can see you can create as many templates as you wish and then just change them to have a default one that you want to use. Or you can just load a new template. So for example, if I go into create a new episode, okay, and at the moment I don't have any show notes here. Like I say, normally I would copy and paste the manual one. But let's say I know I've got a default or I've got a previously created template. I can just go to the show notes template and choose which one to use. So let's go to the summer template. And now you can see before I start adding my copy manually, that's already added my footer and social accounts. And because that's from a template that I've created, all these blocks, as you remember, are dynamic. So it's got my most up-to-date information for the footer that I want to have for the show notes and for the social accounts that I want to have for the show notes. So a really cool way to have either a default template that's loaded all the time, or if you still prefer to continue copy pasting some of the stuff from your own production workflow, so whether that's Captivate's episode planning or Google Docs, Notion, etc., you can do that and then just add the show notes template underneath it once you've got the manual stuff added before you obviously create the episode. So it's a really cool way to either use default or manual and then really optimize it with blocks and shortcodes that are super easy to keep updated as you go. So I'm going to stop sharing now and just head on back to the stream here. And let's have a look at some questions. Have any questions popped in? And who we got in here? We got Matthew. Hey, bud. Good to see you, mate. Yeah, so if you've got the blocks in the show notes already, and they're dynamic, they need to be set to dynamic as opposed to my static. I was trying to remember the name there. So it needs to be set to dynamic. Then yes, once you make a change to the block on the block section, that will then update across the episodes that has that block previously implemented or added to the show notes. And as you saw on the player, it takes out what you remove, or it would add what you add to that one. Okay. And I think that's the one I just got there. So yeah, and update show notes and all. Yeah. So as I mentioned, as long as it's a dynamic show note, as long as it's a dynamic block and it's already added to previous episodes, yeah, when you update it, we will update it automatically. Okay. So can you preview how it will look before I publish it to the web? So you can and you can't. If you're using Captivate's websites or the Captivate site option, we don't have a preview feature as such. An episode has to be published. As I mentioned, it's because it uses the API. So an episode has to be published for the episode show page to show with all the details. So what you would have to do is look at the web player version and see the show notes and make sure that all the blocks are not in place. We'll be updating Captivate sites. I'm going to say maybe early next year now. I'm not going to give a time frame because I know Kieran and Pierre are developers. I've got a massive, schedule for the remainder of this year with some big features coming out. But when we do update Captivate sites, one of the feature requests that we've had is to have a preview option. So that's where you'd be able to preview. But currently, you wouldn't be able to see it on a website. You'd be able to see it on the Captivate player. Okay. Yep. You mentioned that. Because we have so much to go through, we do go through the features and how they work. We do have our tutorials on the Captivate Help Center, so help.captivate.fm. That has all the walkthroughs and tutorials to do at your own pace. And pop-ups may be a feature that we add. It's getting that fine balance between how often you see it and how often you not see it. You put a cookie on there so you don't see it after you've seen it, etc. But our head of design, Gary, is currently doing a big onboarding stroke UX project that has tooltips, pop-ups, etc. But again, it's getting that balance that has the information that you want without upsetting people that don't need all that information. So that's just making sure that we do it in the Captivate way, where it's nice and clean and simple and easy to use. And then you have that option to use. But as I mentioned, in the meantime, you have the Help Center that's got all the walkthroughs that you can do at your own pace and know exactly what feature does. And also the teams there in the support chat that can always answer, any questions if you have any issues like that. And as Ben mentions there, it's that Help Resource Center will be the one that you would use for that. Is it possible to upload a reference document and link to it in the show notes? You can if it's a PDF. So when let me just bring up my share screen again. Okay. So share screen, and let's go back to this and make sure we've got this one on here. There we go. Okay. So yeah, you can, if you go to your media library. Okay. So let's go to content library, discard Dax. I don't want to save the changes. You'll see here you can upload new files. Okay, so you can do episode audio, dynamic ad content, and other files. So this is where you can upload a PDF file. So if I can maybe actually find, let's see if I can find a PDF now. Quickly show you. All right, so I'm just looking away at the moment. So I'm looking in my Finder folder to see if I've got any PDFs that I can quickly upload. There we go. Let's upload this one. Okay, this was the hotel we stayed at the podcast show London back in May. So you can see here, there's the PDF there. So I'm just going to upload that file. And now what you'll see is if you click on the file name, you've got a URL there where we store the file for you. So all you would do, you'd copy that, and then you would link that to whatever you want to link to in your show notes. So it might be download the free, PDF or booklet or whatever you want to call that for the actual file itself. Link that in the show notes, and that will open up that PDF file and allow your listeners to download that. Okay, so yeah, you can do that for sure. There we go. Yeah, exactly. There's a few feature requests. With feature requests alone, because there's some feature requests I'd love to see on Captivate, and I'm always like bugging Pierre and Kieran, the poor souls. I'm always bugging them about some features that I'd love from a personal use point of view. But again, it's always like trying to get that fine line between, is it a great feature that helps a lot, or is it a specific feature that maybe only one or two want, and you have to, divvy that up with development time and resources, and, does it really fall into the Captivate way, and does it talk to the other features in Captivate? Because obviously the main thing with Captivate is we want our features to talk to each other. So that's why our dynamic content talks to the research plan, and research planning talks to Amy dynamic inserts and content. That talks to your attribution links, which then talks to your spot. And so it's like all one big loop, basically. So as long as we can release a feature that makes sense and really makes podcasters' lives easier at scale, that's always something that we'll look to implement. And obviously, a website preview is a great one to have. But again, I can't put down a timeline on that. I know we're going to be updating Captivate sites with some new features and options, and that is being added to the feature request list. But it's then down to developers, Kieran and Pierre, to allocate, okay, this makes sense. This doesn't quite make sense yet because we have to build a new feature that would actually make this work even better once we release that feature. So that's where we sort of sit with the feature requests. Amy is, now you're asking, it's been a while since I said this, it's the audio monetization and insertion engine for its full technical name. Basically, it's Captivate's in-house dynamic content tool. So if you want to upload a pre-roll, a mid-roll, or a post-roll, and it's either sponsor messages or it's your own, updates, you might have a new book coming out or a new online course, or you maybe have a live stream coming out, anything like that you want to add dynamically, you can upload that and use that with Captivate's Amy, which, as I mentioned, just puts in pre-roll, mid-roll, and post-roll. So that's what Amy stands for sure. We've done that in a previous live stream, Jim. I will see if Ben can link to that because that was it on a live stream? Hold on, you know what? let me just check if that's on a previous live stream, and it might be one that's coming up. I know we've been speaking in support about network features. So let's just have a look on that, when that is. I know we've touched on network features with the team option. So let's have a look. There we go. August 13, that's coming up, Jim. So 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks today. So not next week's. Next week's is monetization tools for everyone. But yeah, in 2 weeks' time, that'll be the team members and networks. So not a problem. And as I mentioned, I know you've got a lot of podcast episodes, etc., coming over. So that one on August 13, which will be the third to last live stream, actually. We're getting to the end of these ones. That'll be all about networks, setting them up, network sites, network team members, network analytics, all the cool features you'd expect to see with the networks. Okay. So I'm going to start wrapping up soon. We've got till 12 o'clock, so we've still got about 9 minutes or so. So if you do have any questions about the dynamic show notes feature, or how you'd use it on your own podcast and when you would use blocks, templates, etc., drop them in the comments. If not, just drop in the comments what you're up to over the next 7 days. Let us know what's happening in your podcasting world. Have you got a new podcast? You got new episodes, etc.? Get a bit of self-promotion going in the comments there so people can check it out if it sounds interesting to them. But yeah, like I mentioned, next week we're going to be looking at monetization tools, which is going to be awesome. So this is Captivate's memberships and tips primarily, but there's also other features as well. So you've got Apple delegated delivery. You've got private podcasts that you can use for monetization. You've got exclude from feed that you can use to have exclusive content for some followers as opposed to public stuff for other followers. So this is like a really cool one that's going to be happening next week, as I mentioned, all about monetization, memberships, tips. Memberships is basically Captivate's version of Patreon, and tips is Captivate's version of Buy Me a Coffee, stuff like that. The main difference is because it's all within Captivate, it talks really well to when you're creating episodes and coming up with some really cool features and tracking promos, etc., and sponsor links, because we have all these features inside the Captivate dashboard. Okay. So what we got there, Sloan? You kick off your singles Going Sleepy mini podcast that share once. I love that. So is this this is a separate podcast, Sloan? Yeah, it's like on top of your Sleep with Rockstars. That's your main podcast. This is like a little mini podcast. It's not bonus episodes within the same podcast. But that's awesome. This is what I love about podcasting. You can have your main podcast, and Jim, I know you're probably the same, mate, actually, with networks and your different podcasts across your networks. But you can have your main podcast and then come up with some ideas for, one-offs, mini episodes, etc. So this one, cool, perfect. It's going to be bonus episodes. Again, great. And bonus episodes you can use them, if you wish, as leads. Let's say you ever want to monetize the podcast with some really exclusive episodes or early access, whatever that looks like. The bonus ones are perfect for that. Or even making the bonus ones premium content that go a bit deeper. I know you're saying they're mini episodes than the one sleep tip, but if there was ever down the line you want to go a little bit deeper on a topic that you mentioned in your main podcast, this is where great, bonus content can be used for monetization, etc. Final credit card processing service and part for that does sales tax remittances. That sounds fun. I've done that before, or not quite to that degree. My wife used to co-own a bookstore. Well, online bookstore, not a physical one. And they had to go through that. So I was trying to help her and our colleagues with that. And that was kind of not fun to do at the time. So you have my well wishes for that. I know how that can be. So I'm going to start wrapping up now. As I mentioned, next week we're all about monetization. So tips, memberships, etc. Appreciate everyone jumping in for this for today's live stream. And as I mentioned, we do have the online help center at help.captivate.fm. So if there's any sections in the streams that go by a little bit too quickly or aren't quite as clear, etc., that's always there to access. Whether you're a Captivate user or not, obviously it makes more sense if you are a Captivate user because it talks to the features. But if you're not a Captivate user, it does tell you all what the features do as well, which can help you decide whether you want to use Captivate down the line, for example. Okay. So, yep, you're very welcome. Next week, we'll be here, same time, August 6th, did I say? Yeah, August 6th. I'm sorry, I'm going on like a mini holiday tomorrow. So today's my like last work day. Then I'm off for like just under a week or so, and I'll be back in time for the live stream, which is always nice. So I was trying to think what the date was. So yeah, whatever you've got over the next week. Obviously I know what you've just got. You've showed there, but what have you got planned for the next week with podcast episodes, sorting money and taxes out, etc. Hope you have a great week. I hope the weather's kind to you, not too hot and sticky. I know it probably is where you are, but hopefully it starts to cool down. And I hope you have some awesome podcasting episodes coming out soon. And we'll see you same time, same place next week. Until then, keep podcasting and keep having fun. That's the main thing. Take care.